So leaks about the M1X Max just keep on coming, and today we have another massive report from Luke Miani and Alex on Twitter, who basically give us new details on the M1X MacBook Pro, as well as a redesigned Mac Mini. Now, before we delve into these leaks, I do want to say that obviously Luke has made it pretty clear that he and Alex are pretty new to the leaking game, so take the information with a massive grain of salt. Anyways, with that disclaimer aside, let's just delve in, and that begins with the renders we have of the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Right, so there are a few interesting things to note about the design. Number one, it's not completely flat like the iPad Pro. Instead, it will be slightly rounded at the corners, and I'm not sure as to why Apple's done this. Anyways, Luke does say the design will be completely flat on the top and bottom, so this should be thinner than the outgoing design. The next thing to note about the design is the port selection. So obviously we've heard tons and tons of leaks about Apple resurrecting some legacy ports, and well, the renders illustrate this too. So we have HDMI and a SD card slot on the right side of the machine alongside one USB Type-C port, and on the other side we see MagSafe, two Thunderbolt ports, and a headphone jack. So yes, it seems we are sacrificing one Thunderbolt port for, of course, the extra legacy ports we're gaining with this design. Now, I'm not sure how to feel about this change because USB Type-C or Thunderbolt ports, they're universal. They can be used for pretty much anything, whereas HDMI and the SD card slots have very specific uses which won't apply to everyone, so they could be redundant to some users, whereas most of us would use the 4 Thunderbolt ports, and so it's sort of a shame that we have to sacrifice on these amazing USB Type-C ports for the legacy ports to return. Also, it kind of feels a little weird to me that there's only one extra Thunderbolt port on the higher end machines over the base MacBook Air and the base MacBook Pro, which have 2. My issues with this design don't end there, because the next issue I have is something I saw with the renders of the M2 MacBook Air as well, and that is the full-size function row. So like I said in my MacBook Air video, I'm not sure about this change because I think that the MacBooks don't need a full-size function row because this makes the trackpad smaller. Now yes, I know some of you might say the trackpad on the current Macs are massive. And yeah, I guess that is a fair point, but I do like the fact MacBook trackpads have always been expansive, especially since this is the main way of interacting with your MacBook. Also do note, as far as I know, Apple takes pride in their gigantic trackpads because they always mention that the trackpad is much larger than the previous generation in every keynote, introducing a new design, and so this is kind of a step backwards. And again, I'm not so sure how to feel about this change. However, one thing that has pissed off some people is the fact there is no MacBook Pro text at the bottom. Now, I think it looks way cleaner without the text, and to be fair, Apple did do this with the first Retina MacBooks, so yeah, I like this look. I'm definitely a fan of no text. Oh, and by the way, I'm sure a lot of you guys are happy to see black bezels and a black keyboard, so clearly the prosumer computers in the Mac range will continue to offer black bezels as per usual, and I am very, very happy about that. Anyways, that's enough of the renders. Let's now delve into the specs and features that Luke and Alex mentioned in their report. So the first thing to note is the lack of mini LED, because yes, apparently mini LED won't be happening till 2022. Now this does make a ton of sense in my opinion, because as I mentioned in a previous video, Digitimes did say that mini LED would be having supply constraints for the rest of the year purely because of COVID getting worse in Taiwan, where they make these displays, and of course there is a general shortage for specific components like mini LED, and we have seen the effects of this with the iPad Pro because the mini LED iPad Pro has been pushed back till mid-July, so clearly Apple is having some major issues with this tech. And so much like they have done in the past, if Apple needs to get out a product within a specific time frame, they're willing to cut any features that aren't necessary, so I do think mini LED will be pushed back. Anyways, delving into the M1X, basically this report reiterates everything Mark Gurman told us a few days ago. So a 10-core CPU with 8 power cores and 2 efficiency cores, and then the choice of a 16 or 32-core GPU. Now again, we have no clue whether the GPU will be integrated or not. I personally think that, much like Love to Dream suggested, maybe we'll see a different die for the GPU and a multi-chip package. So basically Apple can have the best of both worlds. They have the efficiency that comes with an integrated GPU, but of course it's way beefier and way more powerful. Now the good news keeps on coming because apparently we're finally seeing 1080p webcams on the MacBook Pro. It's about bloody time, but yes, I am very happy about this change, and hopefully we see the better microphones that we find on the iMac on the MacBook Pro 2, because those iMac mics are pretty amazing, especially since they can somehow focus on your voice when you're in a busy area. So this upgrade would be appreciated on the MacBook Pro 2. Now as for the speakers, apparently they are getting better with these new MacBooks, and maybe they could include the support for Dolby Atmos and spatial audio. Now this makes perfect sense to me because obviously Apple wants you to take advantage of spatial audio with Apple Music. Now the final major thing that Luke mentions in his report is battery life on these new MacBook Pros. So apparently the 14-inch could get 23 hours of battery life, and maybe the 16-inch could get 25 to 30 hours of battery life. That's absolutely insane. I am speechless because those numbers are bonkers. In fact, they're so bonkers they seem a little too good to be true, because these MacBook Pros are going to have less efficiency cores than the M1 machines, and that means M1X is going to be way more power hungry, and well, assuming the 14-inch is going to be very similar in size to the 13-inch, I'm assuming battery capacity could also be very similar. So how exactly can they get 3 more hours of battery life with the M1X 14-inch over the M1 13-inch? Obviously, I'm assuming a ton of things here, and maybe with the new design they can give us a slightly larger battery on the 14-inch, but honestly, I doubt that, because the 14-inch is literally a 13-inch body with slightly thinner bezels. So yeah, I would temper your expectations, because while battery life will be pretty good, I don't think it's gonna be mind-blowing as this rumor hints at. Anyways, let's finally end on the M1X Mac Mini, and basically there's not much to say here. It's going to be exactly like the M1X MacBook Pros in terms of specs, but there will be a slight redesign with the Mac Mini, and basically you should get a slightly flatter design that's going to be slightly thinner, and also the LED indicator will be vertically centered, and the bottom will have feet very similar to the new iMac, so basically long strips of rubber. Now as for pricing, the pretty amazing part is that the prices should stay pretty much exactly the same as the current models. So the M1X Mac Mini should start at $1,100, the 14-inch MacBook Pro starts at $1,800, and then the 16-inch starts at $2,400. So yeah, that's pretty much all the new information we got from Luke and Alex, but let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on the lack of mini LED on the MacBook Pro? Is that a deal breaker for you guys or not? Anyways, I'll end it here. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out the video in the icon above about some details on the Apple Watch Series 7. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.